Revealed. 10 spine-chilling encounters with sinister feral people in haunted Appalachia. Lydia had heard the stories. Tales of feral people lurking in the Appalachian shadows, descendants of a cursed family, driven mad by the very woods they roamed. Desperate for a fresh start, she moved to a secluded farmhouse where the picturesque views cloaked the danger lurking just beyond the tree line. Night after night, she felt as if the forest watched, its breath heavy against the creaking walls. On this night, as darkness descended, house shadows danced eerily with every flicker from the candlelit kitchen. Jacob and Molly sat at the table, their eyes wide with muted anticipation. Lydia busied herself, hastily tossing together dinner, though her heart raced. The trees whispered outside, branches snapping sharp, like fingers tapping at her windows, begging her to listen. It must be the wind, she thought, dismissing the nagging doubt creeping into her mind. Then her phone vibrated. A message from a neighbor read, "Be careful after dark. Strange things happen in these woods, families vanish." Chills slithered down Lydia's spine. She forced a smile for Jacob, who instinctively leaned toward his sister. "Just the wild animals," she lied, her voice trembling. Later, with the kids tucked into bed, silence enveloped the house. But it was a silence thickened with unseen dread. Every little sound outside sent her heart pounding, crunches in the leaves, rustles in the brush. Her phone buzzed again, a text thread of folklore about families that had gone missing without a trace. Sleep crept away, and an insistent fear gripped her, a fear that maybe her new life was just a veneer hiding something monstrous. She decided to visit the local sheriff the next day. She was met with a smile that felt more condescending than reassuring. "A bad past can warp your view, ma'am," he said, writing her off as paranoid, a casualty of her previous life filled with chaos. Anger bubbled in her throat, but she swallowed it, feeling more alone than ever. Desperation pushed Lydia into the community's folklore. Gradually, the chatter uncovered dark patterns, disappearances, preternatural events blurred behind nervously exchanged glances and smirks from neighbors. "Just friendly folks," they said, but friendly was only skin deep. Back at home, a storm brewed in the night, whipping through the trees. Jacob, eyes wide, claimed he saw figures moving in the woods. She laughed it off, only kids' wild imaginations, but the wind howled louder, icy fingers stroking her skin. After lingering dread settled in her gut, she found silence in the house unsettling. One late evening, she overheard her neighbors whispering. Their conversation sent ice through her veins. They spoke of rituals, of bloodlines, and their connection to the very legends she had tried to brush aside. The lights began to flicker in her home, one by one. Darkness enveloped her like a predator stalking its prey. The tension was a living creature. Lydia felt it close around her throat as she struggled for breath, her heart hammering against her ribcage. She locked the door, but the impending dread wouldn't relent. They were close, too close. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the woods, and she glimpsed shadows swaying and darting. Instinct drove her to Jacob's room, just as fear exploded through her like wildfire. He lay in bed, trembling, eyes fixed on the window. "Mom, they're outside." The words shattered her hopes. Outside, the whispers turned into guttural growls. A nightmare had come to claim them. As Lydia stood at the threshold of that darkened room, an heirloom resting heavy in the walls whispered the secrets of those who vanished before. The storm raged on, but inside her, something even more terrifying brewed. The growls grew louder, vibrating through the wooden walls of the house, invading the very marrow of Lydia's bones. She stepped into Jacob's room, clutching the doorframe, heart racing like a caged animal. Jacob's eyes were wide, reflecting the pale light from the storm outside. "They know we're here," he whispered, tears shimmering at the corners of his eyes. Lydia pulled him close, her breath shaky. "It's just the wind. It's just a storm." But even as she spoke, she felt the words crumble against the weight of the foreboding outside. Creeping shadows brushed against the windowpane, twisting and melding, as if they had a life of their own. In those fleeting moments illuminated by the flash of lightning, Lydia saw them. Shapes flitting in the darkness, parodies of humanity, their features twisted, eyes glistening with an otherworldly hunger. As thunder roared overhead, their silhouettes seemed to draw nearer, prowling closer to her sanctuary. "Mom!" Molly called from the other room, her voice small and terrified. The sound sliced through Lydia's fear, pulling her away from the window. She crossed the threshold into the hallway, dread pulsing in her veins. Molly stood in her bedroom door, hair wild and eyes wide with fright. "What's happening?" she cried. "There's nothing to worry about, honey," Lydia said, but the panic in her own heart betrayed her reassurances. She wanted to believe it was all a storm, all just the wild imaginations of her children. But the shadows were real. They were now pressing against the house, looking to invade every crack, every crevice. Outmatched by the fear tightening around her throat, Lydia turned back to Jacob, whose trembling lips parted to utter a word that chilled her to the core. "They're coming for us, Mom." A crash echoed through the house, something heavy falling against the back door. Lydia dashed back, heart pounding, only to find the door straining against unseen pressure. She pushed against it, the wood trembling with each assault from the outside. "Stay close, kids!" she yelled, knowing the helplessness that radiated from her voice. She kept pushing against the door, legs shaking under the weight of dread coiling in her gut. But the pressure on the other side escalated. It felt as if something was trying to enter, something born of the very nightmares she had tried to ignore. "Mom!" "The window!" Jacob shouted, his voice a frantic plea. A dark figure loomed outside, pressing against the glass. Time seemed to suspend. Her heart skipped as she turned. The storm's shadows swirled, the air thick with an energy that felt alive, and suddenly, the window shattered. Glass shards flew inward, and Lydia gasped, pulling the kids to her side. A figure stepped into the room, lit for a brief moment by lightning, its eyes reflecting an insatiable hunger. It looked human yet distinctly feral, mouth twisted in a grin that sent pricks of ice cascading down her spine. Before she could think, instinct kicked in. "Run!" she bellowed, her voice slicing through the chaos. She grabbed the children by the hands and dashed down the hall, the heat of terror propelling them forward. Darkness shadowed every corner as they stumbled into the living room. The flickering candlelight barely illuminated the path ahead. Within moments, the feral figure had company. More shadows bursting into the house, each one more grotesque than the last. Panic ignited within her like wildfire. The porch door beckoned, but the children hesitated, their bodies barely able to comprehend the dread stalking them. "Go!" she screamed, and without thinking, she flung the door wide open, the night air rushing in cold and alive. They stepped into the unknown, the storm still howling, but there were figures closing in all around them, fierce, wild eyes glinting under the sliver of moonlight. As they ran hand in hand toward the whispering forest, the questions that clawed at Lydia's mind exploded. The truth behind the disappearances, the rituals, the bloodlines. Would she unlock the horrors hidden in the woods? Would they become just another story lost to the wild? Just as they slipped into the trees, she heard a voice calling from behind, a low, guttural sound that sent a wave of dread through her. "Join us, our family." The woods felt alive, pressing in on them, as they pushed deeper into the shadows. Fear sank its claws in deeper as she wondered what had just been unleashed, and what lay waiting for them in the dark. They hurried deeper into the obscured embrace of the forest, branches clawing at their clothes, whispering secrets of long-buried terror. Lydia focused on the weight of her children's hands in hers, grounding her in the chaos that swirled around them. Between the cracks of the trees, the shadows darted. The only sounds were the pulse of her heart and the rustle of the branches, joining in a sinister symphony. "Where do we go now?" Jacob gasped, his small voice shaking, mere inches from surrendering to panic. "Keep going," Lydia urged, scanning the surroundings for any looming threat. The fear she felt was palpable, thick like fog in her lungs. "Just keep running." But the darkness wasn't silent. There were growls, rumblings that matched the storm. From behind, it felt as if the night itself had come alive, pursing them with a hunger that left a cold sweat dripping down her spine. "Mom, I can't see," Molly cried, stumbling over a twisted root. Lydia turned just in time to catch her as she fell, pulling her close. "Look at me, Molly. Focus on my voice," she said, forcing a calmness into her words. But there was nothing calm in her racing heart. Then it happened. A flash of light burst through the treetops, the lingering glow of the storm revealing a moment of clarity. In that fleeting glow, Lydia caught a glimpse of them, figures flanking the trees, eyes glowing fiercely in the darkness. Their grins impossibly wide and full of angles that shouldn't exist. They were closing in, flickering like phantoms. "Mom, they're gonna get us," Molly whimpered. "No," Lydia whispered, her resolve igniting. They couldn't stay here, trapped among the shadows that were moving fast, forcing a collision between instinct to flee and the urge to fight. The figures were beings of nightmare, hungry for fear, and she wouldn't allow her children to become prey. They stumbled into a clearing, moonlight pouring in like a silver waterfall, illuminating the life that thrived in the darkness. Strange plants, entwined roots, and beyond. "Molly, stay here," Lydia breathed as she scanned the area. A sickening thought pricked her, a knot in her stomach. What if she couldn't keep them safe? What if this was where it ended? In that moment, a voice wafted through the air, a familiar cadence that sent 2 shards of ice slicing through her heart. "Lydia! Sweet Lydia!" It was a haunting melody she hadn't heard in years. There, emerging from the shadows, was her mother, draped in darkness yet glowing with that same twisted hunger. Another shadow shifted beside her, revealing Lydia's father, equally feral, their demeanor alien yet achingly familiar. "No, no, this can't be." The words escaped her as tears brimmed at her eyes. "Join us," her mother called, the edges of her voice like broken glass. "We've been waiting. You belong with us." Lydia felt the fabric of reality unravel. She glanced at Jacob and Molly, their eyes wide with confusion, fear, and a glimmer of hope, all mixed into one unrecognizable emotion. "Run, kids," she commanded, the urgency spurring her on as she pulled them away from the apparition of family. But they stood rooted, transfixed by the horror revealing itself. "Come back, Lydia," her father growled, a menacing edge creeping into his once loving tone. "Do you hear them?" Jacob begged, clutching Lydia's sleeve as if she might slip away. "They're calling you." The shadows around them shifted, their movements synchronized like a monster with infinite limbs. The pressure of their gaze bore down, a demand that felt undeniable. "Don't listen. We have to go." But the fork in the road loomed ahead. Would they run from the blood that pulsed in their veins or confront the nightmares that had started it all? Lydia's breath caught, realizing they were at the center of a decision that would shape their fates. As they stumbled back into the cover of the trees, the cries behind them surged into echoes swallowed by the night. The looming darkness stretched towards her, whispering secrets and promises of belonging that sickened her. Isolation and danger wrapped around them, and out there, just beyond escape, waited the truth. With each step, the primal urge to find refuge surged within her. But at the edge of the forest, her heart dropped. A surreal vision drew closer. A flickering silhouette, broad shoulders hunched, moving toward them with purpose. A figure cloaked in despair. "Do you really think you can run from what's in your blood?" It rasped, voice a chilling symphony of bones and shadows. As they froze, Lydia felt dread crawl under her skin. The unrelenting tension tightened like a noose around her neck. What if the answer lay not in fleeing but in embracing the dark? And in that moment of uncertainty, she realized she needed to find out what awaited them in the converging darkness. The air thickened, oppressive as it pressed down on them. Lydia's breath shortened. Fear clawed at her throat. The figure before them moved closer, an obscured identity cloaked in the shadows that danced around it, spinning like a vengeful spirit. Each step it took sounded like thunder rolling in a distant storm, echoing through the trees. "Mom, I don't like this," Jacob whimpered, squeezing her hand tighter. His voice trembled, a fragile string ready to snap. "Stay close," Lydia whispered, her eyes darting from the figure to Molly, who was wide-eyed, paralyzed in a mixture of terror and fascination. There was something ethereal about the looming shape, yet its presence dripped with malice. "Join us." It rasped again, more insistent now. "They can't protect you from the truth." Lydia felt the pull of the voice like a dark enchantment, luring her, scraping against her resolve. Memories surfaced, fleeting images of laughter and warmth, twisted now in the context of that terrible hunger. What did it mean? Was it an invitation or a warning? "Molly, Jacob," she said, her voice trembling, "we have to." Before she could finish, the figure lunged. It was fast, moving through the shadows as if they were its veins. With every inch it closed, the children shifted behind Lydia, clutching her tighter, the very essence of their survival bound to her strength. "Run!" she shouted, now fully aware of the flickering shadows behind them, the sinister figures weaving through the trees. She could hear their growls, low and guttural, a chorus of the damned. They sprinted away, leaving the clearing behind, but the darkness clawed at them, won't let them go. Branches snagged their clothes, sharp like nails tearing at their skin. The forest became a maze alive with whispers, taunts echoing through the underbrush. "You can't escape. You'll always belong." Lydia could feel the shadows stretch, taunting her. Panic drove her deeper into the labyrinth, but every direction looked the same. Desperation surged. They needed to find a way out. "Keep moving," she urged. Yet, fear boiled down in every breath. What if they were too late? A sudden rustling broke her concentration, a deeper growl that vibrated the ground beneath them. Lydia hesitated, turning back for a moment. The figure was gone, but glaring eyes flickered in motion through the trees, acknowledging her acknowledgement, revealing fangs unnaturally elongated. They were no longer simply her nightmares, but something tangible, something that lived and breathed just beyond the reach of reason. "Mom, where are we going?" Molly gasped. "I don't know," Lydia admitted, her heart racing uncontrollably, pushing against her ribs. "We just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other." Just then, a sharp cracking sound echoed as a weight fell heavily in the bush nearby. Her heart stopped. They had inadvertently encroached into another territory. Then, out of the darkness, a haggard face emerged, terror etched deep into his features. It was a man, if he could be called that, skin taut against bone, eyes wide, devoid of sanity. "Run! They're coming for you." His voice bore the weight of despair reaching out, but was offset by something primal churning beneath. It was real, too real. Lydia barely acknowledged him, urging Jacob and Molly around him. "We can't stop. They'll get us." "Mom, what if he knows something?" Jacob's voice cracked. But the moment of indecision, a heartbeat suspended in the air, felt like eternity. Suddenly, from within the thicket behind the man, the growl grew shrill. He froze, absorbing the very essence of fear. A matrix of shadows surged forward, weaving toward them, relentless like a tide. And in that moment, Lydia felt the weight of choice crash against her again. Fight or flee. The man screamed. It echoed through the trees, swallowed by darkness, followed by a bestial roar. She yelled, "Keep running," as she pulled her children. But terror was coiling tight, and the scent of something ancient and feral thrummed all around. Lydia felt it surge with each breath, pulling them closer into a nightmare, not just threatening to come alive, but to devour them whole. As they dashed further into the trees, hoping for escape, the shadows coalesced behind them, reclaiming their prize. The haunting words broke through the chaos, growling through the roots and branches. "Join us, you must." And that was when she realized they were not just running from a monster but toward the truth buried deep within her. What kind of truth? the kind that could tear her family apart or bind them forever into the depths of the dark. With her heart hammering, she gasped, "Get ready to run again," but would they be running from the monsters within or to the legacy they couldn't shake? Would they survive the night? Or would dawn reveal something worse? Branches snapped beneath their hurried feet, their path choked with underbrush that seemed alive, dragging at their ankles, as if the forest itself was conspiring to hold them back. Lydia's breath was a rapid, shallow gasp, dampened by fear that thickened the air like smoke. She could feel Jacob's grip tightening around her fingers, while Molly stumbled over roots hidden in the darkness. "Faster! We have to move faster," Lydia urged, glancing back for a moment. Shadows danced, pulsating against the backdrop of the moonlight, that stony figure for moments before lingering just at the corners of her vision, a cursed reminder of what they were running from. "What if we can't keep going? What if we just stop?" Jacob panted, desperation lacing his voice. Just the thought sent a shudder through Lydia. "We won stop. We can't." She tried to inject confidence into her own words. "We're going to make it. Just keep running." "Where to? Where are we going?" Molly's voice broke, tiny and frail in the oppressive dark. "Anywhere but here," Lydia shot back. But where was anywhere against the cold grip of the forest? The feeling that the trees were closing in accelerated her pulse, and the growls in the distance pulsed through her bones. They thrummed like a terrible song that promised betrayal. And then it hit her. They needed to find shelter, somewhere safe, if only for a moment. If they could just catch their breath, think clearly. They weren't just victims but a family, and they had to fight for that. A flicker of hope ignited in her chest as a half-remembered image flashed through her mind. A cabin. Old, dilapidated. A place her late father had mentioned, tucked away in the woods, a family refuge long since abandoned. Maybe it would offer the safety they desperately needed. "Follow me," she shouted over her shoulder, pushing deeper into the looming shadows. The sounds of pursuit faded momentarily. Maybe the darkness itself was hesitating, but the respite was brief. A sudden crash from the left, like a beast ripping through the underbrush, seized Lydia's attention. Heart racing, she swung around. The shadows were shifting again, unmistakably closer, and through them came a flurry of movement. Figures, undefined but moving deliberately, against the dark, their empty eyes glowing with a terrible hunger. "Mom!" The panic in her children's voices sliced through the clamoring fear in Lydia's heart. She swiftly turned back toward the path ahead but felt the air shift behind her. The man they'd seen earlier loomed close again, more hollow and desperate than before. "Don't listen," he rasped, the words twisting painfully in his throat. "They're hunting you. They'll make you part of them." Each word dripped with urgency, but Lydia was torn. Part of her wanted to listen, to understand. But the hungry growls and howls from the dark confirmed the urgency. They needed to move. "Run!" she screamed, lunging forward. The children followed, their quick footsteps pounding against the ground, panic giving them speed. The trees grew denser, their branches now more menacing, scratching at their arms and faces behind them. The figures began to cry out, their voices intertwining, creating a chorus that echoed through the trees, growing louder and more sinister. It was a sound that gnawed at the edges of Lydia's sanity. "Mom, they're getting closer," Jacob cried, his voice cracking like a twig. In that moment, the shadows shifted, parting slightly, and Lydia caught a glimpse of something new. Someone standing amid the chaos. A woman, wild-eyed, with hair that hung loose and tangled. She swayed slowly, beckoning to them, lips curled in a laugh that was charming yet sharp like shattered glass. "Come with me, you'll be free," she sang, her voice dripping with temptation. "Don't listen," Lydia shouted, her head pounding. But Molly whispered, "Is she telling the truth? Could they really escape?" The thought chilled her, but she forced it down. They had come too far to turn back, and suddenly the path split ahead, dimly illuminated by scattered moonlight. "Left or right?" Lydia shouted, glancing between the two diverging paths as the shadows surged behind them, a gnashing tide of insatiable hunger. The children froze, fear igniting their features with terror. "Choose," With a hard swallow, Lydia raised her arm, pointing. Right. They bolted, plunging into the unknown, the cacophony of high-pitched laughter ringing louder behind them. But as they ran, the forest deepened, constricting, revealing an ominous truth hiding beneath layers of shadow. Something was watching from the darkness. And it was hungry. Would Lydia be able to lead her children to safety? Or would terrifying secrets within those shadows change everything forever? The path twisted deeper into the woods, the ground uneven and treacherous underfoot. Each step felt heavier, as though the forest itself conspired to slow their escape. Lydia led the way, grinding her jaw against the rising panic. She didn't dare look back. They had chosen right. Right was the last thread of hope they could cling to amidst the chaos. Behind them the wailing grew louder, a chorus of despair that curled around Lydia's heart like a razor wire. Stay together, she called hoarsely, the command echoing into the depths of the dark. Jacob's hand felt icy in hers, and Molly's small frame trembled. The trees grew thicker, their trunks gnarled and twisted. It felt like the forest was closing in, forming a suffocating barrier. Lydia pressed on, fueled by an instinct that urged her to find shelter. She remembered that old cabin, a ghost of a memory tucked in her mind. A flicker of something warm, something safe. A distant flash of wood came into view, half hidden behind a thicket of bramble. There, the cabin. Lydia pointed, her heart fluttering with urgency. But just as hope kindled, a crashing sound erupted behind them. Fear surged through her as she glanced back to see the dark figures spilling from the branches. Their eyes aglow, their faces warped masks of hunger and rage. Run! She shouted again, adrenaline now screaming through her veins. They charged toward the cabin, a fleeting sanctuary. As they neared, Lydia could see the rickety structure barely standing among the encroaching wilderness. Timber creaked eerily in the night air, almost as if the cabin itself mourned the dark secrets it harbored. Inside, the air was stale. Dust danced in the few beams of moonlight breaking through grimy windows. Shut the door. Quick! Molly gasped as they stumbled in. Lydia slammed the door behind them, her heart thumping wildly against her ribcage. Jacob moved to the window, peeking out through the filthy glass. They're still coming. His voice shuddered as he turned back, his face ghostly pale. Lydia felt sick. The shadows pressed against the walls outside, shifting, snaking around the structure like a living entity. The haunting lullaby from before echoed in her mind. What do we do now? Molly's voice trembled, and Lydia glanced at her children. Their eyes wide, reflecting sheer terror in the dim light. The cabin walls seemed to pulse, breathing with an unsettling rhythm, and whispers filled the air. You can't hide, a voice hissed, seeping through cracks as if the very wood had taken on a life of its own. Join us, Lydia shuddered but clutched the kids closer to her side. It's lying. We won't join anyone, she shot back, trying to drown out the cruel temptation. Another crash reverberated outside, the door rattling as something struck it from the other side. The cacophony of growls merged with the whispers, threatening to split her mind in two. Help! Jacob cried, his voice cracking, and Lydia caught sight of dread pooling in his eyes. Stay back, she ordered, adrenaline blazing in her chest. Holding on to desperation, she glanced around the cabin. There had to be something they could use. But the whispers grew more insistent, clawing at the edges of her sanity. You can be free. The promise wrapped around her, coiling tightly. Join us, become one with us. Lydia's heart raced as shadows began to shift closer to the window. They couldn't stay here. Grab anything you can. We need to barricade the door, she shouted, her voice raw with fear. It wasn't just an escape that was needed anymore. It was survival. As they scrambled to find anything they could use, the door rattled again with renewed vigor. The growls transformed into something far more eager, hungry for them. Then, a dreadful realization slipped into her thoughts. If whatever was out there succeeded in breaking through, what would it mean for her family? Then came the chilling sound of something scraping against the cabin's walls. Inching closer, a promise of terror lurking just outside. The shadows began to morph, coalescing into shapes, something ancient and wrong. Would they be able to outsmart this unseen horror? Or were Lydia and her children doomed to become its next victims? The moment Lydia's heart dropped into her stomach, a loud thud echoed against the door. The shadows outside pressed in tighter, a dark tide ready to swallow them whole. She turned, frantically shoving the coffee table against the door, the wood creaking in resistance. "Help me," she shouted, her voice barely slicing through the din of pounding and howling. Jacob grabbed the worn couch, his knuckles white against the upholstery, while Molly, frozen with fear, stood at the window, eyes widening at the growing shapes. Lydia's mind raced. What were those things? They felt real, tangible, but also a nightmare materializing in the shadows. The whispers escalated, gritty voices merging into a chilling chant that seeped into her bones. "Join us," her breath quickened, panic clawing its way up her throat. "No, that's not real. Stay strong," she yelled, though her voice shook. Again the sounds came, a sickening, slashing sound against the walls, as if talons tore at the wood. Eager for the flesh that hid within, Jacob let out a choked cry. "Mom, they're coming." The fear in his eyes fueled her urgency. She gestured for him to help weigh the furniture down. Their survival depended on every second. Desperation boiled inside her. Time was running out. "Molly, look for anything," she urged, eyes darting around the dimly lit room. The walls felt less like protection and more like a prison, every creak a mocking reminder of their vulnerability. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw Molly, plucking a rusted axe from a cobwebbed corner. It was heavy, but with a look of determination, Molly lifted it, brandishing it like a knight would a sword. "Please, not that," Lydia whispered, trying to steady her trembling hands. It was a tool of survival, but they had no idea what lurked beyond the door. Another crash shook the cabin. They were stronger than she imagined. The wood splintered, a section crumpling under the force. "Hurry!" Lydia shouted again, trying to keep the panic at bay. They shoved a barrel, an old dresser, anything they could. The door rattled violently, the breath of darkness slipping through the cracks. Goosebumps crawled up her arms. This was not just a fight for safety, this felt ritualistic. The sound of the whispers changed, lacing into laughter, a sickening cacophony that seemed to dance in the air. Lydia clenched her jaw, fighting the urge to scream. She could almost see shadows twisting into grotesque forms, each shape clamoring for a taste of what lay inside. "Mom, what do we do?" Jacob demanded, sweaty and frantic. "Keep your eyes on the door," Lydia instructed, taking the axe from Molly, trembling under its weight herself. "We fight together, we do not let them in." The door splintered wider, exposing the inky darkness beyond. Long, claw-like fingers slipped through, reaching, probing. "Join us," the voice whispered, sultry and malicious, an invitation filled with promises of freedom. Lydia's instincts screamed to back away, but she gathered every ounce of strength. "We are not yours," she shouted, raising the axe as the door threatened to yield. She swung it down hard against the protruding hand, each fraction of movement sending shockwaves of dread coursing through her veins. But in that chilling moment of contact came a revelation. The hand didn't flinch. It didn't bleed. Instead, it curled around the axe, pulling with bone-crushing force. Darkness coiled in and around her mind as the whispers swelled, filling her with doubt. "Join us, be free," in a burst of brutal resolve. Lydia yanked back the axe, pulling against the grip with all her strength. But the shadows thickened, surrounding the children in a pressing grasp of fear as the cabin groaned under the weight of their malevolence. Just then, a sudden silence cloaked the cabin, an oppressive stillness that blanketed dread like a fog, and Lydia's breath caught. "Stay close," she commanded, but the ominous shift of energy curdled the air. Something was changing, morphing in that silence. And then she saw it, a figure emerging slowly from the dark, a silhouette against the cabin window, stepping forth from beyond the veil. "Will they join us willingly?" it whispered, those words curling around her heart like a vice. She took a step back as an icy chill sliced through her veins. What had they awakened? Somewhere deep within the shadows, an answer awaited, a horrific truth that might shatter their resolve forever. Lydia's heart thundered in her chest as the figure stepped closer. Each slow, deliberate movement danced with an unsettling grace. The shape was human, yet not. The contours rippled like dark water, twisting in unnatural ways that sent shivers down her spine. Shadows melted and pooled around its feet, absorbing the faint light that struggled to penetrate the gloom. Jacob pressed against her side, breathing heavily, his fear infectious. "What do we do, Mom?" His voice was brittle, pulled taut like a bowstring. "We hold on," Lydia whispered, her own voice barely above a breath. Reason was slipping away, replaced by the bizarre, frantic pulse of survival. She gripped the axe tightly, knuckles turning white, torn between the instinct to fight and the urge to flee. "Will they join us willingly?" The figure's voice slithered through the air, smooth and beckoning. There was an unmistakable allure in those words, a promise threaded with deceit. "Get back!" She screamed at the dark outline, holding the axe up high. The figure paused, its face obscured but somehow compelling. An inky mass of shadow flickered, revealing an eye, gleaming like a predator-s in the dark. Behind Lydia, a crash drew her attention. The door trembled ominously, the splintering wood too weak to defend against the growing surge outside. A rush of wind slammed against it, and the children jumped as one, the air thickening with dread. "Mom!" Molly's voice cracked, panic rising. "They're at the window." Lydia spun around, the axe feeling heavy in her hand. Her heart lurched at the sight. Shapes pressed against the glass, their faces marred in grotesque expressions, mouths twisted in overlapping screams that echoed in her mind. The pure horror etched into those features sent her stumbling back, clenching her eyes shut. "Don't look," she urged, her heart racing faster than she thought possible. "Don't look." But the whispers returned, voices skimming over her skin like cold water. "Join us. Be a part of us." Something within her began to crack. The power of those voices pulled at her insides, like hooks digging deep. Lydia gritted her teeth, fighting against the internal tempest. "Lydia, listen to me." It was Jacob. He was gripping her arm, voice desperate but steady. "We can't let them in. We're stronger together." His courage poured into her. She turned back to the window, steeling herself against the sickening faces beyond the glass. "We will not join you," she bellowed, raising the axe like a shield, ready to swing at the shadows threatening to envelop her family. In that moment of defiance, the door buckled again. The darkness pressed against her face, cold breath wrapping around her. The whispers zoomed in, tightening the coil of terror. "Join us. Forever. Mom!" The fear in Jacob's voice snapped her back just as the door splintered further. Her eyes widened as tendrils of shadow broke through, wrapping around her ankles like creeping vines. An overwhelming panic surged through her, pulling tight. She could feel the shadows tugging at the edges of her sanity. "Jacob! Molly!" she yelled, struggling against the curling darkness. "Stay together." Lydia swung the axe viciously, cutting through the air. The blade connected with nothing but fog, and her breath hitched. How could she fight something so intangible? Suddenly, the darkness pulsed, and the cabin rattled. A resounding roar erupted from beyond the door, and the walls shook as if the house itself was choosing sides. The shadows receded for just a brief moment, revealing a pierced silhouette just outside. Then horrors anew. The creature from the shadows grinned, revealing a mouth full of jagged teeth, a dark smirk that shattered her last line of defense. "You cannot fight what you have awakened," it crooned, and the world spun out of control. Lydia's grip on the axe slipped. She was losing them, losing herself. In that moment of gripping despair and absolute fright, she understood. She hadn't just awakened something in the darkness. They had opened the door to something worse than her imagination could conjure. Then silence fell again. As the whispers escalated, a jarring crescendo, promising all that awaited beyond the threshold. What would they demand of her now? What line would she have to cross? The shadows grew bolder, the terrible shapes looming ever closer. The air felt thick with despair, as if the darkness itself hungered to consume them whole. What choices would she be forced to make before it was over? The shadows thickened, suffocating the cabin. Lydia felt them pressing against her, a palpable presence that defied logic. Jacob's grip tightened on her arm, his small body shaking like a leaf in a storm. "Mom, what do we do?" His voice trembled, a whisper through the rising chaos. "Stay close," she breathed, every muscle in her body screaming for movement as the air grew heavy with an unseen weight. The door creaked again, a long, wretched sound that rattled her bones. Behind the door, low, guttural growls resonated, the pitch crawling under her skin. With each pulse, the collective whispers turned sharper, becoming a cacophony. "Join us. Join us." Lydia closed her eyes for a heartbeat, focusing on the warmth of her children beside her. Their presence became her anchor, staving off the dread threatening to consume her whole. "Mom!" Molly cried out, her voice an urgent plea cut through with tears. I can't breathe." The shadows coiled tighter, chilling her ankles, creeping slowly upwards, a creeping invasion that racked her heart with dread. She kicked out, but the shadowy tendrils only pulsed around her like a serpent, tightening with every frantic move. "Fight it!" Jacob shouted, but that fierce resolve fractured as the cabin walls trembled again, reverberating with a sinister resonance. The lights flickered wildly, before plunging them deeper into darkness. "Hold on to the axe," Lydia ordered, the handle slick and unyielding in her grasp. If she could just find the will to swing it. Every part of her whispered that it could release her from the nightmare clenching at her feet. But fear clawed at her throat, urging her to turn. What if it won't work? She thought, heart racing. The darkness flickered like a candle flame, revealing twisted figures formed of pure blackness. Pale faces with hollow eyes, stretching into agonizing grins, burst forth from the gloom, their movements jerky, unnatural. Their ghastly smiles widened further. "You will all belong to us." Soon then the door burst open with a splintering crash, and Lydia was thrown back against the wall, breath knocked from her lungs. A nightmarish figure loomed in the doorway, an embodiment of darkness, twisting and writhing in maddening anticipation. The air vibrated with unspeakable excitement, a hunger begging for satiation. "No!" Lydia shouted, hoisting the axe high above her head just as it stalked forward. The figure's gaze was piercing, pinning her in place. "You have called for us," it hissed, the voice a sickly whisper that sent goosebumps down her arms. "Your pain is an invitation. We have come for you." With renewed urgency, she swung the axe with all her might. The blade arced through the heavy air, slicing into nothingness, a futile motion against the inevitable. "Mom!" "The window!" Jacob shouted, his voice rising like a terrified alarm. Lydia turned just in time to see shadowy hands smashing through, shards of glass bursting into the room like knives. They clawed desperately, grasping at her children, hungry for flesh and soul alike. She couldn't let them take her babies that I in a heartbeat. Everything aligned, desperation and instinct merged, igniting a primal fury within her. Lydia thrust with the axe, aiming for the mass of flailing shadows that now thrummed with brutal energy. Her strikes echoed with a resounding clang against the doorway. As she yelled, "You will not take them!" The darkness recoiled, screeching in disdain, but it wasn't enough. Grotesque faces filled her vision, and the once distant whispers were now a wild storm crashing against the walls of her mind. "Lydia!" Jacob's voice, terrified but unwavering, broke through the din. "It's coming." Time slowed, a looming dread straining against them. The beast was not just outside anymore. It had seeped inside, and a new horror filled the air. Lydia suddenly understood. The shadows were not just seeking to claim them. They were toying with them, feeding off their fear, luring them into despair. "Fight! Fight!" she screamed, her voice cracking as she prepared for what would come next. But as if sensing their resolve, the swirling darkness twisted into something else, something larger, more terrifying. It drew itself into focus, looming above them with malevolent intent. Why fight what you cannot escape? The creature roared, its voice now layered with 100 whispers. Suddenly, a bright light burst from behind Lydia, bathing the room in an ethereal glow. The shadows hissed and recoiled, unsure, faltering before the light as truth. "Leave them," a new voice cried, echoing through the cabin like thunder. Lydia turned, bewildered, as she faced a figure stepping through the brightness, a beacon cutting through the chaos. But who was this? What salvation could they offer? Time hung heavy with the question. Would this light be their salvation, or had they merely exchanged one darkness for another? And in that moment, she felt the ground shift beneath her, a warning ripple through the air. Was escape even an option, or did they dance on the precipice of their own doom? The light pulsed, filling the cabin with warmth and hope. It was intense, banishing shadows back into their corners. The darkness screeched, splintering under the invasion of illumination, but the figures lingered just out of reach, watching, waiting. The familiar silhouette stepping into the glow unfurled slowly, and Lydia found herself breathless as if caught in a spell. "Mommy?" Jacob's voice bordered on a whisper, tinged with both reverence and fear. It was impossible. Yet there she stood, Lydia's grandmother, vibrant and whole, shimmering like sunlight through leaves. "I've come to help you." Lydia's heart twisted. Memories of warmth, laughter, and love washed over her as tears blurred her vision. "You're real," she stammered, struggling against the tide of disbelief. "But what your family is in danger." Her grandmother's voice cut through the chaos, firm and resolute. "You need to embrace the light. This isn't the time for games." Lydia cried, fear clawing at her throat. "We can't let them take us. They want to. I know what they want," her grandmother replied, her eyes glimmering with ancient wisdom. "They've fed off your fear and despair. But your love binds you together. Let that be your shield." Lydia glanced at Jacob and Molly, panic still shuddering in their expressions. But in her grandmother's eyes, she saw an unwavering strength. Could love really be their savior? The shadows surged again, a twisting vortex of despair and hunger threatening to snuff out their flickering hope. Lydia tightened her grip on the axe, challenging the darkness. But now there was something more. In that moment, she understood. Survival hinged on connection, on the power of familial love that had existed even in the darkest times. "Stay close," Lydia yelled, rallying her children, their bond becoming a luminous force against the encroaching shadows. "Remember the stories. Remember us." Echoes of childhood dreams echoed back, creating a resounding chorus of resilience. As if responding to their unity, the shadows faltered. Lydia could see shapes twist and contort in agony, their snarling faces warping into regret beneath the light with every murmur of love shared among her family. "They can't take us," she shouted, rallying every ounce of defiance in her voice, her grandmother at her side. "We will not join you." Suddenly, bursts of radiant energy expanded outwards from the light, engulfing the dark figures. They recoiled, screeches of anguish reverberating through the room as if the very shadows were unraveling. "Together hold your hands," her grandmother urged, stepping into Lydia's circle. With trembling fists, they clasped hands and formed a huddle, the three of them surrounding the embodiment of love, a power that felt unstoppable. The cabin walls trembled with the force of the clash, shadows howling futilely against the waves of light. Lydia could feel warmth engulfing her, wrapping around them like a sanctuary. "Let our bond be our strength. Together we can push them away." With the last ounce of strength coursing through her, Lydia shouted, "We are more than shadow and fear. We are family." A brilliant radiance erupted, surging forth, drawing upon the purity of their connection. The shadows twisted, pleading yet furious, but the light consumed them in a blinding flash. Lydia squeezed her children's hands, heart racing in unison. For an agonizing moment, everything froze, then shattered as the light erupted, enveloping them. Lydia gasped as the darkness disintegrated to ash, spiraling in whirling echoes. And then silence. Lydia sat up, breathless, what was left of the cabin flickering in shadow, but one soft light remained. She opened her eyes to find Jacob and Molly beside her, still in the cabin. It stood defiantly against the wilderness, the dark trees now a safe distance away, no menace left in sight. "Is it over?" Jacob whispered, eyes darting around expectantly. "We did it," Lydia breathed, chest tight with lingering fear but suffused with relief. Together, we faced them. With tears streaming down her face, Molly managed a weak smile. "You were so brave, Mom." Lydia gathered them close, feeling the warmth of love flood through her, sealing the bond that protected them. "No," she choked, voice cracking. "We were brave together." Backlit by the faint glow from the woods, their connection brimmed with unyielding power, unwavering through everything they had faced. Hope and family would forever nestle in the corners of their hearts, light overtaking darkness time and again. As dawn broke, golden rays washed over the land, dispelling remnants of the night. Lydia knew they had not only survived a nightmare but emerged stronger through it. Out of the shadowed forest, the whispers faded, legends shifting into mere echoes. Above all, they had sealed their family's legacy, a testament that love triumphs, slicing through the darkness that dared to encroach. With a new dawn, Lydia resolved to honor that bond, embracing every moment with her children. They would be free, forever enshrined in the light. Before she turned, a sharp breath filled her lungs. The legends were real, and they had lived to tell their tale. Now it was time for the world to be reminded. If you've made it this far, there's something you need to do. Hit that subscribe button immediately, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. You've done the journey with us, now help us grow. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, it really makes a difference. And flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. We want to hear your voice. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Real fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Your engagement matters, and it's time to shine.